What this title means for Sophie, beautiful Sophie, is that she no longer has to curtsy to Meghan Markle, okay? In the line of succession, she no longer has to curtsy to Meghan Markle, okay? That is a booyah moment.
The Fab Four reunion is being described today as a PR disaster after Meghan and Harry were given the cold shoulder at Westminster Abbey.
Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, may seem calm and composed, but her actions and words over the years paint a very revealing picture about her relationship with Meghan. When Meghan first married into the royal family, the Queen herself stepped in with a bold move. She personally handpicked Sophie to guide Meghan through the complicated world of royal life. This wasn't just a casual suggestion, this was a royal stamp of approval. But here's what makes this so interesting. Sophie wasn't chosen because she was the most senior or the most polished royal. She was chosen because she had walked the exact same path. Sophie came into the royal family as a total outsider, just like Meghan. She had to learn everything from scratch, figure out the unwritten rules, and earn her place. And she did. She even stumbled early on, most notably with the 2001 tabloid sting, where she was caught in an embarrassing undercover setup. But instead of crumbling, she bounced back harder, eventually becoming one of the most respected and admired royals in the entire family. She adapted so fast and so smoothly that it almost looked like she had been born into royalty.
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. As we've heard this afternoon, this is the last time they will appear in public before stepping back as senior members of the...
So when the Queen gave her blessing for Sophie to mentor Meghan, Sophie didn't hesitate. She was genuinely excited and ready to help Meghan find her footing inside the royal world. Sophie didn't just offer help from a distance, she showed up in person. She reportedly went straight to Meghan's place and spent hours in deep conversation with her. She answered questions, shared insider knowledge about royal duties, and gave Meghan a real, honest look at what life inside the monarchy was actually like. And Sophie went even further than that. She handed over her personal number and made it crystal clear, call me anytime, day or night, for advice, support, or even just to talk to someone who truly gets the pressure of this life. She left the door wide open, fully believing she was helping someone who genuinely wanted to build a life within the royal family. But what happened next? Nothing. Silence. According to reports, after Sophie walked out of that meeting, Meghan never reached out again. No follow-up call, no return visit, not even a quick message. Sophie's personal number sat untouched. The mentorship that the Queen herself had set up gone.
Speaking with The Telegraph recently, the couple joked, "Oprah who? And what interview?" in response to the fallout from the March TV special.
Just like that, what Sophie believed was the start of a meaningful royal bond quietly turned into the last time the two women ever spoke. That one meeting, all those hours, all that openness, and it led absolutely nowhere. But here's the thing, Sophie, being the gracious and composed person she is, didn't throw her hands up or walk away bitter. She didn't give up. Sophie reached out multiple times, genuinely offering her support, but Meghan showed zero interest. And when Meghan was later asked why she never leaned on anyone for guidance, her response was straight up dismissive. Meghan said, "I have Harry. That's all I need," as if Harry had any clue about royal protocol. And to make it even more awkward, Harry was standing right there grinning, while Meghan openly made fun of curtsying to the Queen, the same Queen who personally arranged for Sophie to mentor her. So what was Sophie's reaction to all of this? Well, she eventually stopped losing sleep over it. After Harry and Meghan stepped away from royal duties, a Sunday Times source revealed something that turned heads. Sophie was relieved they had left. She reportedly said she was relieved she no longer had to curtsy to Meghan.
When the two were asked about the interview heard around the world, Prince Edward simply said, "Oprah who?" Sophie asked with a laugh, "What interview?" But at the same time, Sophie spoke up to defend the Archbishop of Canterbury, who famously asked Oprah what she did for a living at Harry and Meghan's wedding. Sophie said, quote, if you're not into chat shows, there's no reason why you should know who she is. Certainly not in this country anyway."
Let that sink in. This is Sophie we're talking about, the most composed, diplomatic, and unbothered woman in that entire palace. If even she reached that breaking point, it tells you everything about what was really going on behind those closed doors. All those ignored calls and rejected offers didn't just vanish, they stacked up slowly, quietly building tension that eventually became impossible to ignore. By the time Commonwealth Day 2020 rolled around Meghan's last royal engagement, something between these two women had clearly and undeniably shifted. Sophie, who had always been warm and endlessly patient, was visibly done extending any more grace toward Meghan, and the whole world could see it. The body language between them that day spoke louder than any words ever could. During the Commonwealth event, Sophie appeared cold and emotionally distant. Her posture was stiff and straight, her gaze deliberately turned away from Meghan. There was no warmth, no smile, no effort to connect, just an icy, composed wall. Then came the moment that stopped everyone cold, the eye contact.
In case anyone needs a refresher on Harry and Meghan's infamous interview with Oprah that aired earlier this year, the couple claimed that the royal family did not support Meghan's request for mental health support.
Sophie turned and locked eyes with Meghan, holding that gaze without flinching, without blinking, without backing down. And Meghan? She knew exactly what that look meant. She quickly dropped her eyes, looked away, and her smile disappeared almost instantly. That single moment said more than any interview ever could. It was clear whatever warmth had once existed between these two women was completely gone. No empathy, no willingness to connect, just a quiet but unmistakable tension that had been building for years finally showing its face. Even the exit from the Abbey became a statement. Instead of leaving alongside Sophie and Edward as protocol expected, Meghan physically crossed through chairs to catch up with William and Catherine, cutting ahead of the scheduled order. This wasn't just awkward, it went directly against expected royal protocol. And since the Sussexes were scheduled to exit after the Cambridges, this wasn't about queuing position, it was a deliberate move, and everyone in that room noticed. The tension between them eventually hit a boiling point, and when the explosive Oprah interview dropped, Sophie and Edward were asked about it directly. Their response? Pure, calculated shade. They responded with, "Oprah who?"
Meghan Markle is in no way looking for your love or approval. According to The Telegraph's Bryony Gordon, the royal says she is not seeking people's affection and, quote, doesn't want people to love her. She just wants them to be able to hear her.
She's even looking to distance herself from royal protocol and formalities when on official royal outings.
What interview? Just like that, completely dismissing the entire bombshell moment as if it never happened. But Sophie wasn't done. In a Telegraph interview, she twisted the knife even further, saying, "If you're not into chat shows, there's no reason why you should know who she is. Sharp, clean, and devastating." Remember when Meghan famously claimed she never Googled Harry and knew nothing about the royals? Well, Sophie just handed that energy right back and then some. In just one sentence, Sophie managed to dismiss both Oprah Winfrey and the entire interview spectacle without even raising her voice. Iconic. Then, during a 2020 interview, Sophie dropped what many saw as her biggest dig yet. She reflected on her own experience joining the royal family, casually mentioning that it took her 5 years to fully adjust and that she wasn't even sure how it would all pan out. The message was clear: 2 years simply wasn't enough time, and everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. After Meghan's exit, Sophie stayed publicly diplomatic, saying, "I just hope they will be happy, and we all try to help any new member of the family." But the receipts tell a different story. Help was offered repeatedly, it was just never accepted. Every attempt Sophie made, the guidance, the advice, the emotional support was reportedly turned down, leaving Sophie frustrated and completely done with the situation. Even when the Queen personally appointed Sophie to mentor Meghan, Sophie showed up with open arms and got nothing in return. Reports make it clear that the help wasn't just ignored, it was flat out unwelcome. So the guidance was pulled, the support dried up, and Meghan's time in the royal family collapsed faster than anyone expected.
So apparently, Sophie is married to Prince Edward. Well, she was upgraded from the Countess of Wessex to the Duchess of Edinburgh. She got a little bit of a promotion. This is a big deal. But let me tell you why it's important. So both Queen Elizabeth and Queen Camilla previously held this title. But what this title means, What this title means for Sophie, beautiful Sophie, is that she no longer has to curtsy to Meghan Markle.
But let's really slow down and unpack this, because this final chapter of Sophie and Meghan's story is so much deeper than most people realize. This isn't just about two women who didn't get along. This is about power, grace, resilience, and what happens when someone is handed every possible advantage and still walks away empty-handed. The mentor nobody wanted. When the Queen herself steps in and says this person will guide you, that is not a casual suggestion. That is a royal directive wrapped in silk. The Queen had watched Sophie navigate some of the most challenging waters in modern royal history. She had seen Sophie stumble, recover, grow, and eventually flourish into one of the most trusted and admired members of the entire family. So when Meghan arrived, bright, ambitious, and completely new to the world of monarchy, the Queen made what she believed was the perfect call. Sophie wasn't just some random royal assigned to babysit a new arrival. She was specifically chosen because her journey mirrored Meghan's almost exactly. Both women came from outside the royal bubble. Both had established careers and public profiles before stepping into this world. Both had to completely rewire how they moved, spoke, dressed, and behaved in public. The difference? Sophie embraced the process. She sat with the discomfort, put in the years, and came out the other side stronger and more respected than ever. So when Sophie walked into that first meeting with Meghan, she wasn't just offering advice. She was offering a roadmap built from her own real lived experience. She answered every question with honesty. She shared insider knowledge that you simply cannot find in any book or briefing document. She gave Meghan an authentic, unfiltered look at what royal life truly demands. And then she handed over her personal number and said, "Call me anytime." That level of access and generosity is not given lightly in royal circles. That was Sophie opening a door that very few people ever get to walk through. The silence that said everything, and then nothing. Complete and total silence. According to reports, from the moment Sophie walked out of that meeting, Meghan never reached out again. Not once. No call, no message, no follow-up visit. Sophie's number sat untouched. The Queen's carefully arranged mentorship quietly dissolved before it even had a real chance to begin. Now let's think about what that silence actually communicates. Because in the royal world, relationships and alliances matter enormously. When someone of Sophie's standing offers you direct access and genuine support, ignoring that isn't just impolite, it's a statement. It signals that you either don't value what's being offered or you don't believe you need it at all. And that brings us to the now infamous quote that made so many people raise their eyebrows. When Meghan was asked why she never leaned on anyone within the royal family for support, she responded by saying, "I have Harry, that's all I need." Just like that. As if Harry, who had grown up inside the royal machine his entire life and had never once had to learn it from the outside, was somehow going to be her complete guide to royal protocol, diplomacy, and public life. Harry was by her side, grinning, while she openly mocked curtsying to the Queen. The very Queen who had gone out of her way to arrange support for Meghan. That image alone spoke volumes about where things were already heading. Sophie's patience was not unlimited. Here is something that people often overlook when discussing Sophie's role in all of this. Sophie did not give up after that first meeting was ignored. She kept trying. She reportedly reached out multiple times, continuing to offer her support, her time, and her guidance. This is a woman with an incredibly full schedule, royal duties, charity commitments, and a family of her own, and she kept extending her hand anyway. But every attempt was met with the same wall. Meghan showed no interest in building that connection. And eventually, even Sophie, the most composed, patient, and gracious woman in that palace, reached her limit. When Harry and Meghan finally stepped away from royal duties, a Sunday Times source revealed something that genuinely shocked people. Sophie, the woman known for her warmth and diplomatic nature, was reportedly relieved that they had gone. She was relieved she no longer had to curtsy to Meghan. Read that again and let it land. Sophie, diplomatic, gracious, composed. Sophie was relieved. That is not a small thing. That is years of tension, ignored outreach, and quiet frustration finally finding an outlet. If Sophie reached that point, it tells you everything you need to know about what was really happening behind those palace walls. The body language that broke the internet. Commonwealth Day 2020 became one of the most analysed royal events in recent memory, and for good reason. It was Meghan's last official royal engagement, and the tension in that room was so thick you could almost feel it through the screen. Sophie, who had always carried herself with effortless warmth and openness, was visibly different that day. Her posture was stiff and straight. Her gaze stayed deliberately away from Meghan. There was no welcoming smile, no attempt to bridge the gap, no performance of friendliness for the cameras. Sophie was simply done, and she wasn't hiding it. But the moment that truly stopped people in their tracks was the eye contact exchange. Sophie turned and locked eyes with Meghan, and she held that gaze. She did not look away. She did not soften. She just held it, steady and unflinching, like a woman who had absolutely nothing left to prove and nothing left to lose. And Meghan? She felt it immediately. Her eyes dropped. Her smile disappeared almost instantly. In that single, wordless moment, an entire history of tension, rejection, and quiet frustration played out in real time for the whole world to see. Body language experts and royal watchers had a field day analysing that exchange, but honestly, you didn't need to be an expert to feel what was happening. It was raw, it was real, and it was the kind of moment that cameras catch, but words struggle to fully capture. Even the exit from the Abbey that day became its own statement. Instead of leaving alongside Sophie and Edward as protocol dictated, Meghan physically moved through chairs to catch up with William and Catherine, cutting ahead of the scheduled exit order. Since the Sussexes were meant to exit after the Cambridges, this wasn't about queuing position or confusion. It was a deliberate move that went directly against expected royal protocol, and absolutely everyone in that room took note. The Oprah interview and Sophie's ice-cold response. Then came the moment that shook the entire royal world, the Oprah interview. When Harry and Meghan sat down with Oprah Winfrey and unleashed a series of explosive claims about life inside the royal family, the ripple effects were felt across the globe. Every royal was being watched closely for their reaction. Journalists were circling. The pressure to respond was enormous. And Sophie? Sophie responded with 3 words that were somehow more devastating than any lengthy rebuttal could ever be. When asked about the interview, Sophie and Edward simply said, "Oprah who? What interview?" Just like that. Cool, calm, completely unbothered. The message was sharp and surgical. We don't know what you're talking about, and frankly, we don't care. In a world where everyone was scrambling to respond, analyze, and react, Sophie chose to act as though the entire thing simply didn't register on her radar. But she wasn't finished. In a Telegraph interview, Sophie followed up with another remark that cut just as deep. She said, "If you're not into chat shows, there's no reason why you should know who she is," referring to Oprah Winfrey, one of the most famous and powerful women on the entire planet, as someone you might simply not know about if chat shows aren't your thing. The precision of that shade was truly something to witness, and the timing made it even more pointed. Remember when Meghan famously said she had never Googled Harry before they started dating and knew very little about the royal family? Sophie essentially handed that same energy straight back, wrapped in a bow, and delivered with a perfectly straight face. In one clean statement, Sophie managed to dismiss Oprah, dismiss the interview, and subtly reference Meghan's own claims about ignorance, all without ever raising her voice or dropping her composure. That is a masterclass in royal shade, and it deserves its own dedicated study. The 5-year comment that hit different. If you thought the Oprah response was pointed, Sophie wasn't done delivering quiet blows. During a 2020 interview, Sophie reflected on her own experience of joining the royal family. She spoke openly about how it had taken her a full 5 years to truly adjust to royal life. 5 years of learning, adapting, making mistakes, and figuring out who she was within this very specific and demanding world. And she added that even after all that effort, she wasn't entirely sure how it would all pan out. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a humble and reflective comment from a woman sharing her personal journey. But the subtext? Crystal clear. Meghan entered the royal family and was gone within 2 years, and spent much of that time publicly expressing how difficult and unsupported she felt. Sophie, without ever mentioning Meghan's name, essentially said that 2 years isn't even close to enough time to truly understand or settle into this life. The message landed, and it landed hard. 2 years versus 5 years. Walking away versus staying and doing the work, giving up versus growing through it. Sophie didn't need to spell it out. The contrast did all the talking. The public diplomatic statement that came with receipts. After Meghan and Harry officially stepped back from royal duties, Sophie took the high road publicly, as she always does. She said, "I just hope they will be happy, and we all try to help any new member of the family." Gracious, measured, and completely appropriate for public consumption. But here is where the receipts come in. Meghan had repeatedly stated that she received no support or guidance from within the royal family, that she was left to figure things out alone, that no one reached out or offered help. And yet Sophie reportedly visited her personally, spent hours with her, shared insider knowledge, offered her private number, and then continued to reach out multiple times after being ignored. The help existed. It was real, it was genuine, and it was offered more than once. It simply was not accepted. So when Meghan said no one helped her, Sophie's public statement quietly but effectively told a very different story, one backed by reported facts that painted a completely different picture of what actually went down behind those palace walls. Sophie's glow-up while the drama unfolded. Here is perhaps the most satisfying part of this entire story, and the part that the public absolutely took notice of. While Harry and Meghan's exit from royal duties played out in a very public, very dramatic fashion, Sophie was back home quietly leveling up. Harry and Meghan's departure essentially reshuffled the royal deck, and when the cards settled, Sophie and Edward emerged holding something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. They became the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, a title steeped in history, prestige, and deep royal significance, a title that carries far more weight and legacy than Sussex ever did. The public noticed immediately. While Sussex had become associated with controversy, drama, and ongoing public disputes, Edinburgh carried dignity, tradition, and respect. Sophie didn't fight for it. She didn't campaign for it or position herself to receive it. She simply stayed the course, did her work, maintained her composure, and let the chips fall where they may. And they fell beautifully. The contrast between the two paths could not have been more stark or more telling. One path led outward, into interviews, streaming deals, and a very public ongoing narrative of grievance. The other path led upward quietly, steadily, and with unmistakable grace. What Meghan said about not needing love. At some point, Meghan made a statement that has stuck with a lot of people. She said she doesn't need people to love her. She just wants them to hear her. It was framed as a moment of vulnerability and self-awareness. But the public's response told a very different story, because the public has been hearing her loudly, clearly, and consistently for years now, and what they've heard hasn't always landed the way it was perhaps intended. The more that was said publicly, the more the court of public opinion seemed to shift, not toward sympathy, but toward questions. And while all of that was unfolding, Sophie sat in quiet contrast, never demanding to be heard, never rushing to a camera to tell her side, just existing with dignity, continuing her work, and letting her actions speak for themselves. The public saw that contrast too, and they responded to it. The woman who outclasses in silence. This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. She is not the loudest person in the room. She is not the one who calls press conferences or sits across from interviewers to air private frustrations. She is not the one who leverages personal pain for public sympathy. Sophie is the kind of woman who offers you her hand genuinely, openly, and without conditions. And if you choose not to take it, she doesn't chase you. She doesn't beg. She doesn't make a scene or go to the press about it. She simply withdraws her hand, straightens her posture, and moves forward more composed and more dignified than ever. That quiet confidence is incredibly powerful because it requires no validation. It needs no audience. It doesn't depend on anyone else's response or reaction. Sophie's sense of self is so firmly rooted that she can absorb rejection, frustration, and being overlooked and still show up the next day as the most gracious person in the room. And that is exactly what she did throughout the entire arc of her relationship with Meghan. She offered. She was rejected. She tried again. She was rejected again. She eventually stepped back, not in anger, not in bitterness, but with the quiet certainty of a woman who knows her own worth and doesn't need to prove it to anyone, the legacy that speaks for itself. When you look at where both women stand today, the story writes itself. Sophie continues to carry out royal duties with dedication and distinction. She is deeply involved in charitable causes, particularly around issues of sight loss and conflict-related issues around the world. She travels, she works, she represents, and she does it all with a consistency and commitment that has earned her genuine respect, not just within royal circles, but from the public too. Her reputation has not only survived the turbulent years of royal drama, it has grown stronger because of them. Every moment of grace she demonstrated during the difficult years only added to the picture of who she truly is. And the Duchess of Edinburgh title she now carries isn't just a name. It is a reflection of a journey, a real, complicated, sometimes painful journey that Sophie completed with integrity intact. What this whole story really tells us. At its core, the story of Sophie and Meghan is not really about palace gossip or royal drama. It is about two very different approaches to the same challenge, and the very different outcomes those approaches produced. One approach said, "I don't need help, I have what I need, I'll do this my way." The other approach said, "I struggled, I learned, I asked for help when I needed it, I stayed even when it was hard, and I grew." One approach led to a dramatic exit that has kept everyone talking for years, but not always in a positive way. The other approach led to a title, a legacy, and a level of genuine public respect that no interview or streaming deal can manufacture. Sophie never screamed. She never gave interviews to expose what was happening behind the scenes. She never made herself the victim or the hero of a public narrative. She simply lived her values, day after day, in the quiet and consistent way that real character reveals itself. And in doing so, she said absolutely everything without saying a single word. Meghan once said, "She just wants to be heard." Well, Sophie, without ever asking for an audience, has made herself impossible to ignore, and that is perhaps the most powerful statement of all. So what do you think? Was Sophie playing the long game all along? Was she being quietly strategic? Or was she simply being herself and winning by default? Was her silence a weapon, or was it just the natural behavior of a woman who has always known exactly who she is? Drop everything you're thinking in the comments below. This conversation is just getting started and we want to hear every opinion. If this video had you hooked from start to finish, make sure you hit that like button right now because it truly helps more than you know. Share this with someone who needs to see this story laid out from beginning to end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and never miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.